The loading bay of Seoul Stellar Transit Hub was quiet at 3 in the morning. Do-hyun Kim pushed his cleaning cart down the empty corridor, his footsteps echoing against the metal walls. This was his favorite time of night. No crowds, no noise, just him and the hum of the massive building that connected Earth to the stars. He had been working the night shift for 2 years now. After his divorce, after losing contact with his daughter, this job was perfect. Nobody bothered him. Nobody asked questions. He cleaned, he went home, he slept. That was enough. Do-hyun stopped at the corner of Bay 7. Something was different tonight. There was a shape in the shadows, tucked behind some old cargo containers that nobody used anymore. At first he thought it might be another stray cat. He had been feeding a few of them for months. But this shape was bigger. He moved closer, pulling his flashlight from his belt. The beam of light revealed a young woman. No, not a woman, an alien. Her skin had a strange silver color that seemed to glow very faintly. She was curled up on the cold floor, wearing clothes that were torn and dirty. She looked up at him with large, dark eyes. She looked terrified. Do-hyun should have called security. That was the rule. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she was shaking. Maybe it was how thin she looked. Maybe it was because she reminded him of the refugees he had seen during his time in the military, the ones he could not help. He put his flashlight away and raised his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. The alien girl watched him carefully. She did not run. Do-hyun reached into his bag and pulled out his lunchbox. He always packed extra food just in case he got hungry during his long shift. He opened it and held it out to her. Inside was rice, some vegetables, and a small container of soup. The girl stared at the food. Her hand moved forward slowly, then stopped. She looked at him again as if trying to understand why he was doing this. He set the lunchbox on the floor between them and stepped back. Then he sat down on the ground, keeping his distance. He wanted her to know she was safe. After a long moment, the girl reached for the food. She picked up the container of rice and ate slowly at first, then faster. She was clearly very hungry. Do-hyun noticed that the faint glow on her skin got a little brighter as she ate. He had heard that some aliens had special dietary needs. Maybe she had not found the right food in a long time. When she finished eating, she looked at him again. This time there was something different in her eyes. Not fear. Something softer. She spoke then, but the words were not Korean. They were not any language Do-hyun knew well. It sounded like Galactic Common, the language that many aliens used, but she spoke it with a strange accent. He caught a few words that might have been, "Thank you." Do-hyun nodded and pointed to himself. He said his name slowly and clearly. Then he pointed to her with a questioning look. The girl hesitated. She seemed to think very hard about something. Then she shook her head. No name. Or maybe she did not want to share it. Do-hyun understood. Some people needed to hide. He had learned that in the military. Sometimes giving your name was dangerous. He stood up and looked around the loading bay. This was not a good place to sleep. It was cold and security teams walked through here at least once a night. If they found her, they would take her away. They would ask questions. They might send her back to wherever she came from. Do-hyun made a decision. He gestured for her to follow him. The girl stood up slowly. She was tall, taller than him, but she moved carefully like someone who was hurt or very tired. He led her through the corridors, taking paths that he knew the cameras did not cover well. After working here for 2 years, he knew every blind spot in the system. They went down a level, then through a maintenance tunnel that most people had forgotten about. Finally, they reached a small storage room. It was full of old equipment that nobody used anymore. There was dust everywhere, but it was warm and it was hidden. Nobody came here except him. Do-hyun found some old blankets on a shelf. They were clean enough. He laid them out on the floor in the corner, making a simple bed. The alien girl watched him with those large, dark eyes. When he finished, she moved to the corner and sat down on the blankets. She touched them gently as if she had not felt anything soft in a long time. Do-hyun held up one finger, trying to tell her to wait. Then he left the room and went back to his cart. He grabbed a bottle of water and an extra jacket that he kept in his locker. When he returned, the girl was still sitting in the same spot. She had not tried to leave. He gave her the water and the jacket. She took them and nodded again. That same gesture that seemed to mean thank you. Do-hyun pointed to himself, then to his watch, then held up his hands to show numbers. He was trying to say that he would come back tomorrow at the same time. He was not sure if she understood, but she nodded anyway. As he turned to leave, she spoke again. Just one word in Korean, spoken carefully, as if she had practiced it. His name, Do-hyun. He looked back at her and smiled. It was the first time he had smiled in a long time. Then he pointed at her and said a word that felt right. Hanul. It meant sky in Korean. He had found her looking up at the stars through the bay windows. The girl tilted her head, considering the name. Then she nodded and repeated it softly. Hanul Do-hyun left her there and went back to his work. He finished his shift, but his mind kept returning to the storage room. Who was she? Why was she here? Why was she hiding? These questions stayed with him as he rode the train home. They stayed with him as he lay in his empty apartment trying to sleep. He told himself he was being foolish. He should report her. It was the safe thing to do, the right thing to do. But he thought about her eyes, the fear in them, the hunger, and he thought about all the people he had not been able to help before. Maybe he could help just this once. Maybe it would not hurt to bring her food for a few days just until she was stronger. He did not know that the girl in the storage room was Princess Valara of the Etherian Empire. He did not know that she was worth more than entire planets. He did not know that she had escaped an assassination attempt and crashed near Earth in a damaged escape pod. He did not know that her people had been searching for her for 3 weeks, and Valara did not tell him any of this. For the first time in her life, someone had helped her without knowing who she was. Someone had shown her kindness without wanting anything in return. She wanted to know what that felt like for just a little while longer. High above Earth in the darkness of space, Commander Tavik stared at a screen showing energy signatures. His ships had been scanning this sector for weeks. There had been nothing. But tonight, for just a brief moment, he had detected something, a faint signal that matched Etherian biology. It had come from the surface, from a city called Seoul. The signal was weak and disappeared quickly, but it was there. She was there. His princess was alive. Tavik clenched his fists. They had failed to protect her. The convoy had been attacked, and in the chaos, her escape pod had been struck. They had watched it fall toward this primitive planet, unable to follow right away because of the attackers. By the time they arrived in this system and received permission to search, weeks had passed, but now they had hope. He would find her. He would bring her home, and he would make sure that whoever had her answered for keeping an Etherian royal from her people. He did not know that the person who had her was a simple custodian who just wanted to help. He did not know that his princess was, for the first time in 20 years, genuinely happy. In the storage room, Valara pulled the jacket around her shoulders and lay down on the blankets. She could still taste the rice and vegetables. Simple food, but it had the minerals her body desperately needed. She felt stronger already. She touched the royal seal hidden under her torn shirt. She should activate it. She should call for help. But something made her hesitate. That man, Do-hyun, he had not looked at her with greed or calculation. He had just looked at her like she was someone who needed help. Nothing more, nothing less. In the Etherian court, everyone wanted something. Every kindness had a price. Every smile hid an agenda. But tonight, in a cold storage room on a strange planet, someone had helped her without knowing her value. Valara decided to wait. Just for a little while. Just to see what it felt like to be nobody special. Just to understand what it meant when someone cared without reason. She closed her eyes and, for the first time since the attack, she felt safe. Outside, the first light of dawn was breaking over Seoul. Inside, a friendship was beginning that would change the future of 2 worlds. The transit hub transformed into chaos within minutes. Security teams rushed through every corridor. Hyunwoo Choi was running between communication stations, sweating and shouting orders that nobody seemed to hear. Human military officers had arrived and taken control of the main operations center. Ji-won Park stood with her team near the main landing bay, her weapon ready, but pointed down. She had never seen alien warships this close before. Through the massive windows, she could see them hovering in the darkness above. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Each ship was longer than 3 city blocks, covered in armor that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. The lead ship sent a message in perfect Korean. They were the royal guard of the Etherian Empire. They were searching for their crown princess. They had tracked her signal to this location. They demanded immediate cooperation and access to all areas of the station. Yunwoo nearly fainted when he heard the word princess. He had to sit down and put his head between his knees. A crown princess here at his station. This could not be happening. This was not in any procedure manual he had ever read. Do-hyun stood in the storage room with Hanul, his mind racing. He could hear boots running past in the corridors outside. He could hear shouting in multiple languages. He looked at the girl he had been feeding for 3 months. She stood very still, and her silver skin was glowing so brightly now that it lit up the entire room. She reached under her torn shirt and pulled out something he had never seen before. It was a small disc made of metal that seemed to glow from within. The moment she touched it, it activated. Light projected from it, showing symbols he did not understand. It was clearly some kind of royal seal or identification device. Hanul looked at him with tears in her large eyes. She spoke in Korean, the words careful and clear. She told him her real name, Valara, Princess Valara of the Etherian Empire. She told him she was sorry for lying. She said she never meant to trick him. She just wanted to feel normal for a little while. Do-hyun felt like the floor had disappeared under his feet. A princess. He had been feeding a princess like she was a stray cat. He had given her his old jacket and made her sleep on dusty blankets in a storage room. Horror washed over him. What had he done? What would they think he had done? Before he could speak, the door exploded inward. Not broken, but opened so fast and hard that it slammed against the wall. Armed figures rushed in, wearing armor that seemed alive, shifting and adjusting to their movements. They moved like water, fast and precise, surrounding both him and Valara in seconds. The largest of them stepped forward. He was tall, taller than any human Do-hyun had ever seen. His armor was darker than the others, marked with symbols of rank. His face was hard, with sharp features and eyes that burned with fury. This had to be their commander. Commander Tavik looked at his princess and felt relief crash through him like a wave. She was alive. She was here. 3 months of searching, 3 months of failure and shame, and she was alive. Then he looked at the human standing next to her. A worker of some kind wearing a custodian uniform. Standing in a dirty storage room with the crown princess of the Etherian Empire. The relief turned to rage so fast it made him dizzy. This human had kept their princess here, in this place. Like an animal in hiding, the insult was beyond measuring. The dishonor was unspeakable. Tavik raised his weapon, aiming it at Do-hyun. He spoke in Galactic Common, his voice like grinding stone. He demanded to know what this human had done to the princess, how he had captured her, why he had kept her here like a prisoner. Do-hyun did not understand the words, but he understood the weapon pointed at his face. He raised his hands slowly and spoke in Korean, keeping his voice calm despite his racing heart. He said he had not hurt her. He had only tried to help. Valara stepped between them. The movement was so fast that even the trained guards were surprised. She placed herself directly in front of Do-hyun, facing Tavik. When she spoke, her voice had changed. It was no longer the soft, uncertain voice of Hanul. It was the voice of someone who had been trained from birth to command. She ordered Tavik to lower his weapon. Now, immediately. The commander hesitated for just a second, but then he obeyed. He had sworn an oath to protect and obey the royal family. That oath included taking orders from his princess. Valara turned to face all the guards. She spoke in Galactic Common so they would all understand. She told them that this human had saved her life. When she crashed on this planet injured and starving, he had found her. He had fed her. He had given her shelter. He had asked for nothing in return. He had not known who she was. He had helped her because she needed help. Nothing more. The guards looked at each other in confusion. Humans did things like this. They helped strangers without expecting payment or status. This did not match what they knew about primitive species. This did not match their understanding of how the galaxy worked. Tavik stared at his princess. She had changed in these 3 months. She stood differently. She spoke with more confidence. And she was defending this human with an intensity he had never seen her show for anything at court. Valara continued speaking. She declared before her royal guard that this human, Do-hyun Kim, had shown her more honor than most nobles at court. He would be recognized as a friend of the crown. Anyone who harmed him would answer to her personally. The guards went down on one knee immediately. This was an ancient title, Friend of the Crown. It had not been given to anyone outside the Etherian species in over 1,000 years. It meant that this human was under royal protection. It meant he was considered family. Do-hyun understood none of this. He just saw heavily armed aliens suddenly kneeling around him. He saw Valara standing in front of him like a shield. He felt completely lost and overwhelmed. Outside the storage room, Ji-won and her security team arrived with weapons raised. They had heard the commotion and came running. What they found made them stop in confusion. Alien soldiers kneeling, their missing custodian standing in the center with his hands up, and a silver-skinned alien woman who glowed like a star. Ji-won immediately positioned herself between the aliens and Do-hyun. She did not know what was happening, but Do-hyun was her responsibility. She had promised to protect everyone at this station. That included quiet custodians who fed stray cats. Tavik rose to his feet and assessed the new arrivals. More humans with weapons. He held up one hand and spoke in Korean using a translator device. He told them to stand down. There was no danger here. They had found their princess. This human had helped her. There would be no violence. Ji-won looked at Do-hyun. He looked back at her and shrugged helplessly. She slowly lowered her weapon but did not holster it. Around her, the other security officers did the same. A new figure arrived then. She was older than Valara, but had the same silver skin and dark eyes. She wore robes instead of armor, and she moved with the confidence of someone used to being listened to. This was Envoy Rethis, senior diplomat of the Etherian Empire. Rethis took one look at the scene and immediately understood everything. She had been in politics for 50 years. She knew opportunity when she saw it. A human had saved their princess without knowing her value. This was perfect. This was exactly the kind of story that could transform relations between their peoples. She approached Do-hyun with a warm smile. She spoke in perfect Korean, which surprised everyone. She introduced herself and thanked him on behalf of the Etherian Empire. She said that his kindness would not be forgotten. Do-hyun finally found his voice. He said he had only done what anyone would do. He saw someone who needed help, so he helped. That was all. Rethis smiled wider. That was all. Such a simple human response. Such an alien concept to her people, and such perfect words for the news broadcast that would spread across the galaxy. She turned to Tavik and ordered him to escort the princess to their flagship. They would arrange for proper medical examination and prepare for the journey home. Tavik bowed and gestured for Valara to come with them. Valara looked at Do-hyun. She wanted to say so many things. She wanted to thank him. She wanted to apologize for lying. She wanted to explain why these 3 months had meant everything to her. But with all these people watching, all these guards and witnesses, she could not find the right words. So she said the only thing she could say. Thank you, Do-hyun, for everything. Do-hyun nodded. He did not know what else to do. The girl he had known as Hanul was walking away with armed guards surrounding her. She was a princess. She had always been a princess. And he was just a custodian who cleaned floors. The Etherian soldiers left as quickly as they had arrived. Ji-won holstered her weapon and turned to Do-hyun with questions in her eyes. But before she could ask anything, Hyunwoo came running down the corridor, face red, hair wild. He grabbed Do-hyun by the shoulders and demanded to know everything. Within an hour, the story spread through the entire hub. The quiet night custodian had been hiding an alien princess for 3 months. He had saved her life. The royal guard had declared him a friend of the crown. Human news networks picked up the story. Then galactic news networks. Soon everyone in the solar system knew the name Do-hyun Kim. Do-hyun sat in the security office answering questions from officers who could barely believe what they were hearing. He told them everything. How he found her. How he fed her. 3 months passed like water flowing down a stream. Every night Do-hyun arrived at the transit hub with extra food in his bag. Every night he made his way to the storage room where Hanul waited. At first they could barely communicate. Hanul knew only a few words of Korean, and Do-hyun knew even less Galactic Common. But slowly, night by night, they learned. Do-hyun would point at things and say their names. Hanul would repeat the words in her musical voice. She was a fast learner. By the end of the first month, they could have simple conversations. Hanul told him she was from far away. She said there had been trouble, and she needed to hide for a while. Do-hyun did not push for details. He understood that some stories were too painful to share. Her health improved week by week. The weak glow of her silver skin became bright and steady. She moved with more energy. She smiled more often. Do-hyun brought her different foods to see what she liked best. She loved rice and vegetables, especially ones with certain minerals. She said they tasted like home. During the second month, Hanul started helping Do-hyun with his work. She would organize the storage rooms he needed to clean. She learned how to use the equipment. She was surprisingly good at fixing things that were broken. Do-hyun joked that she should apply for a job at the hub. Hanul laughed but said nothing. They talked about many things during those quiet hours. Do-hyun told her about his life. He spoke about his time in the military, about being a medic, about seeing too much suffering and not being able to save everyone. He told her about his marriage falling apart, about how he had pushed his daughter Minji away because he did not know how to talk about his pain. Hanul listened carefully to every word. She never judged him. She never told him what he should have done differently. She just listened, and somehow that helped more than any advice could have. In return, Hanul told him about her world. She described cities that floated in the sky, buildings made of crystal that sang when the wind blew through them. She talked about art and music and philosophy. She explained how her people valued honor and duty above all else. She said that every action had meaning, every relationship had a purpose. But she also said that sometimes all that meaning felt heavy. Sometimes she wished people would just do things because they wanted to, not because it was their duty. Do-hyun understood that too. He had felt that same weight in the military. One night in the third month, Ji-won Park cornered Do-hyun near the maintenance tunnels. Ji-won was a security officer, young and sharp. She had noticed that Do-hyun was spending too much time in areas he should not need to visit. She had noticed the extra food, the odd hours he kept. She stood in front of him with her arms crossed and asked him directly what he was doing. Do-hyun felt his heart race. If she found Hanul, it would all be over. They would take her away. They would ask questions he could not answer. He decided to tell a version of the truth. He said he was feeding stray animals, cats mostly, a few birds. Ji-won raised an eyebrow. She did not look convinced, but after a long moment she sighed and said that technically it was not against the rules. She told him to be careful and walked away. Do-hyun let out a breath he did not know he was holding. That had been close. Too close. He would need to be more careful, but Ji-won had not believed his story entirely. She was a good security officer, and good security officers trusted their instincts. Her instincts said that Do-hyun was hiding something. She decided to watch him more closely but quietly. If he was doing something dangerous, she would find out. If he was just being kind to animals, then no harm done. As the weeks passed, Do-hyun realized something was changing inside him. He looked forward to work now. He packed better food, trying to find things Hanul might enjoy. He thought about what stories he would tell her. He practiced new Korean words to teach her. He had not felt this way in years. Useful. Connected to someone. It was like finding a part of himself he thought was lost forever. Hanul was changing too. She laughed more easily now. She asked questions about everything. How did humans celebrate happy occasions? What did they do when they were sad? What did Do-hyun dream about? One night she asked him about his daughter. Do-hyun had mentioned Minji before, but never in detail. This time, sitting in the storage room sharing a simple meal, he opened up. Minji was 15 now. Smart, stubborn, kind. She looked like her mother. After the divorce, Minji had been angry at both parents, but especially at Do-hyun. He had been distant even before the separation. He was always working or lost in his own dark thoughts. When the marriage ended, Minji chose to live with her mother. Do-hyun did not fight it. He thought she would be better off without him. Now 2 years had passed with almost no contact. He had sent messages, but Minji rarely responded. He told himself it was better this way. He told himself she did not need a broken father in her life. Hanul was quiet for a long time after he finished talking. Then she said something that surprised him. She said that running away from people you love does not protect them. It just makes everyone lonely. Do-hyun stared at her. How did she know that? How could she understand something he had been running from for so long? Hanul looked sad when she said it, like she was talking about herself too. For a moment, Do-hyun wondered who she had left behind when she came here. But he did not ask. They both had their secrets. The third month came to an end. It was late autumn now, and the nights were getting colder. Do-hyun brought an extra blanket and a small heater he had found in storage. Hanul accepted them gratefully. Her silver skin seemed to glow even brighter in the dim light of the heater. She told him that night about her favorite memory from home. There was a garden in her city where flowers bloomed that only opened at night. They glowed like stars, and when the wind moved through them, they made music. She used to go there when she needed to think. She missed it. Do-hyun said that maybe someday she could go home and see that garden again. Hanel smiled, but it was a sad smile. She said maybe. But she did not sound sure. What neither of them knew was that time was running out. High above Earth, Commander Tavik had been systematically narrowing his search. He had permission from human governments to scan for Etherian life signs, but only in certain areas. The process was slow and frustrating, but Tavik was patient. And he was determined. Every day his ships moved closer to Seoul. Every day the search grid tightened. He knew his princess was somewhere on this planet. He would find her no matter how long it took. In the transit hub, Hyun-woo Choi, the station manager, was having a normal day. Normal meant dealing with delays, angry passengers, and mountains of paperwork. He was stressed as always, living on coffee and complaints. He barely noticed Do-hyun anymore. The night custodian was reliable and quiet. He did his job and never caused trouble. Hyun-woo liked employees like that. They made his life easier. He had no idea that his quiet custodian was hiding an alien in the maintenance levels. He had no idea that in a few days, his station would become the center of the biggest diplomatic event in human history. On the night that marked exactly 3 months since Do-hyun first found her, Hanul seemed different. She was quieter than usual. She kept touching something under her shirt, though she tried to hide it. Do-hyun noticed but said nothing. They shared their meal in silence at first. Then Hanul spoke. She said she needed to tell him something. Something important. Do-hyun looked at her and saw conflict in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak. At that exact moment, alarms screamed through the entire transit hub. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors. The ground shook slightly. Do-hyun jumped to his feet. Hanul went very still, her face turning pale. Do-hyun ran to the door and looked out into the corridor. Other workers were rushing past, talking frantically. He grabbed someone and asked what was happening. The worker said that 3 massive alien warships had just appeared above Earth. They were requesting permission to land at this station. They were searching for someone very important. Do-hyun felt ice in his stomach. He turned back to look at Hanul. She was standing now, and the light from her skin had become very bright. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw apology, fear, and something that looked like goodbye. She whispered one word. Sorry. Do-hyun understood then, with sudden and terrible clarity, that Hanul was not just any refugee. Those ships were here for her, and when they found her, everything would change. Everything they had built together in these 3 months, this simple friendship that had become so important to him, would end. He did not know yet who she really was. He did not know that she was royalty, that she was worth more than entire star systems. But he knew, looking at her face in that moment, that he was about to lose the only friend he had made in years. And Valara, princess of the Etherian Empire, knew that her time of freedom was over. The 3 months of being nobody special, of being just Hanul who shared meals with a kind custodian, were coming to an end. She had to go back to being who she was. She had to face her duty, but not yet. Not quite yet. She reached out and took Do-hyun's hand. She held it for just a moment. Then she let go and waited for the guards to come. How they talked each night. How he never knew who she really was. He told them. The next 2 weeks felt like living in a storm. Do-hyun tried to return to his normal routine, but normal no longer existed. News reporters camped outside his apartment building. His old phone rang constantly with unknown numbers. Government officials wanted to interview him. Scientists wanted to study him. Everyone wanted a piece of the man who saved an alien princess. Do-hyun refused all of it. He turned off his phone. He ignored the knocks on his door. He tried to go to work, but reporters followed him. Ji-won ended up becoming his unofficial bodyguard, keeping people away with her security clearance and her very direct personality. She found him one night sitting in the same storage room where he used to meet Valara. The room was empty now except for the old blankets and the heater he had brought. He was just sitting there, staring at nothing. Ji-won sat down next to him without asking permission. After a long silence, she told him she understood why he had lied about the stray cats. She said she probably would have done the same thing. Then she asked him the question that everyone wanted to ask. Did he know? Did he have any idea who she really was? Do-hyun shook his head. He had no idea. She was just someone who needed help. That was all he saw. That was all he needed to see. Ji-won nodded slowly. She believed him. Most people would have seen an opportunity, a chance for fame or money. But Do-hyun had just seen someone hungry. That said something about who he was. She told him that the Etherian delegation wanted to meet with him formally. Envoy Rethis had requested his presence on their flagship. They wanted to thank him properly. Do-hyun asked if he had a choice. Ji-won smiled sadly and said not really. Meanwhile, Commander Tavik was conducting his own investigation. He had accessed Do-hyun's military records with permission from human authorities. What he found surprised him. This custodian had been a combat medic. He had served with distinction. He had saved many lives under dangerous conditions. He had received medals for valor. Then something had happened. A mission gone wrong. Too many casualties. Too many people he could not save. The record showed that Do-hyun had requested discharge soon after. He had left the military, left his family, and disappeared into a quiet job where he could be alone. Tavik understood this pattern. He had seen it in his own soldiers. Some warriors could not carry the weight of what they had seen. They needed to step away from combat. This human had not been running from duty. He had been running from pain. It made Tavik reconsider his initial judgment. This Do-hyun Kim was not a simple worker taking advantage of their princess. He was a trained soldier with a code of honor, who helped someone in need without thought of reward. That was the action of a warrior, even if he no longer carried weapons. Tavik shared his findings with Envoy Rethis. She listened carefully and nodded. She had already suspected something like this. Humans were proving to be more complex than their initial assessments suggested. This was valuable information. On the flagship, Valara was preparing to return home. Her father, the Emperor, had sent word that she was to come back immediately. There would be ceremonies. Investigations into the assassination attempt. Increased security. Her life would return to what it was before. She stood in her quarters looking at herself in the mirror. She wore full royal attire now. Elegant robes made of fabric that shifted colors. Jewelry that marked her rank. Her hair was styled in the traditional way. She looked like a princess again, but she did not feel like a princess. She felt like someone pretending to be someone else, like wearing a costume that did not fit anymore. 3 months of being Hanul had changed her in ways she was only beginning to understand. There was a knock on her door. Rethis entered without waiting for permission. The envoy had that privilege. She looked at Valara with knowing eyes and asked the question that mattered. Did the princess want to go home? Valara started to give the expected answer. Of course she wanted to go home. It was her duty. But Rethis held up one hand and asked her to try again. This time with honesty. Valara sat down heavily on her bed. She admitted the truth. No, she did not want to go home. Not yet. She had learned something here. Something important about leadership, about connection, about what it meant to care for others without politics involved. She wanted to stay longer. She wanted to understand it better. Rethis smiled. It was not a political smile. It was genuine. She said that could be arranged. The Empire needed an ambassador to Earth anyway. Formal relations were being established. Why should that ambassador not be someone who already understood both cultures? Someone who had lived with humans and learned their ways? Valara stared at her. A royal had never served as ambassador before. It was considered beneath their status. But Rethis pointed out that traditions could change. And having a princess as ambassador would show humans how seriously the Empire took this relationship. There would be conditions, of course. The Emperor would need to approve. Valara would need to return home periodically. She would need to continue her royal studies. But if she presented the request properly, Rethis thought it could work. Valara felt hope rise in her chest for the first time in weeks. Maybe she did not have to choose between duty and the life she wanted. Maybe she could find a way to have both. The day came for Do-hyun to visit the flagship. Ji-won escorted him to the shuttle. He wore his best clothes, which were not very impressive. Just a clean shirt and pants. He felt completely out of place. The shuttle ride up to the ship was brief but amazing. Do-hyun had never been in space before. He looked out the window at Earth growing smaller below and felt his problems grow smaller too. From up here, all the chaos and attention seemed very far away. The flagship was enormous inside. corridors that seemed to go on forever, ceilings so high they disappeared into soft light. Everything was elegant and precise. Do-hyun felt like a dirt stain on a white carpet. Guards escorted him to a formal meeting room. Envoy Rethis was there, Commander Tavik, several other officials whose names he immediately forgot, and Valara, standing near the window looking every bit the princess she was. The meeting was awkward. Rethis thanked him formally on behalf of the Empire. She said his actions had prevented a tragedy, and that his kindness would not be forgotten. There was talk of trade agreements and cultural exchanges. There was mention of his new status as friend of the crown. Do-hyun nodded in all the right places and said very little. He kept looking at Valara. She kept looking back at him. There was so much neither of them could say with all these people present. Finally, Rethis seemed to notice the tension. She smiled and suggested that perhaps the princess and her friend might like a few minutes to speak privately. The other officials stood and filed out. Tavik gave Do-hyun a long look before leaving. It was not threatening anymore. It was measuring, assessing. When they were alone, silence filled the room. Do-hyun did not know where to start. Valara seemed to have the same problem. Finally, she spoke first. She thanked him again, but this time it was personal, not formal. She said the 3 months in that storage room were the happiest she had been in years. She said he had shown her what it meant to be seen as just a person, not as a title or a political asset. She said she would never forget that gift. Do-hyun felt anger rise in him, not at her but at the situation. He told her she did not need to thank him. He had just done what any decent person would do. He was sorry that her life was such that simple kindness seemed special. That was not right. That was not how things should be. Valara looked surprised. Then she laughed. It was the same genuine laugh he remembered from their nights together. She said that was exactly the kind of thing Do-hyun would say. No flattery, no political calculation, just honest frustration that the world was not fair. They talked for an hour. About what would happen next. About her duties. About his life returning to normal or whatever normal looked like now. They carefully avoided talking about what they meant to each other. The topic felt too dangerous, too complicated. When it was time for Do-hyun to leave, Valara walked him to the shuttle bay. At the door, she stopped and looked at him seriously. She said she had a request. Would he be willing to help her again? If she stayed on Earth as ambassador, would he consider working with her? She would need someone who understood both her people and humans, someone she could trust. Do-hyun stared at her. Stay on Earth? As ambassador? He asked if that was really what she wanted or if it was another duty. Valara smiled and said it was both. It was her duty, but it was also what she wanted. For the first time in her life, those two things were the same. Do-hyun said yes before he could think about it too much. Of course he would help. He always helped. It was what he did. On the shuttle ride back to Earth, Do-hyun looked at his old phone. He had turned it back on before leaving the flagship. There were hundreds of messages. He scrolled through them, deleting most without reading. Then one message caught his eye. It was from his daughter, Minji. Just 3 words. I saw you. His hands shook as he read it again. She had seen him on the news. She knew what he had done. He did not know if she was angry or proud or disappointed. But she had reached out. For the first time in 2 years, his daughter had sent him a message. Do-hyun took a deep breath and typed a response. Can we talk? He hit send before fear could stop him. Then he waited. The shuttle. 2 weeks passed and the galaxy held its breath. News spread through every system that Princess Valara of the Etherian Empire had made an unprecedented request. She wanted to stay on Earth as ambassador. The Emperor had not yet given his answer. On Earth, life continued, but everything felt suspended. The transit hub was being renovated to include a proper embassy. Human diplomats were learning Etherian customs. Etherian officials were learning human languages. Everyone was preparing for something that might not happen. Do-hyun met his daughter for the first time in 2 years. They chose a small cafe near her school. He arrived early and sat by the window, watching people pass by, wondering if he would recognize her. She had been 13 when he last saw her. She would be 15 now. When Minji walked in, he knew her immediately. She had gotten taller. Her hair was longer, but she had the same serious expression she used to have as a child when she was thinking hard about something. She saw him and stopped in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Minji walked over and sat down across from him. She did not hug him. He did not expect her to. She looked at him with eyes that were too old for 15. She asked him one question. Why did you save her and not us? Do-hyun felt the words hit him like a physical blow. He had no good answer. He had run from his family because he thought he was broken. He thought they deserved better than someone who carried so much pain. But he had stayed for a stranger. He had helped someone he did not know while abandoning the people who loved him. He told her the truth. He said it was easier to help a stranger because strangers did not expect anything from you. Strangers did not get hurt when you failed. But family, people you loved, they expected you to be strong, and he had not felt strong in a very long time. Minji listened without interrupting. When he finished, she sat quiet for a moment. Then she said something he did not expect. She said she understood. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. She said her mother had explained about his time in the military, about the things he saw, about how some people broke in ways that did not show on the outside. She said she was angry. She was hurt, but she also said she missed him, and she wanted to try. If he was willing to try, so was she. Do-hyun felt tears in his eyes for the first time in years. He reached across the table and took her hand. She let him. They sat there in that cafe for 3 hours, talking about everything and nothing, rebuilding something that had been broken, knowing it would take time but willing to start. Meanwhile, on the flagship, Valara received word from her father. The Emperor had agreed to meet with her to discuss her request. It was not an approval, but it was not a rejection either. She would need to make her case in person before the royal court. This meant leaving Earth for at least 2 weeks. This meant facing her father, the nobles, all the people who would see her request as ridiculous or beneath her station. This meant fighting for what she wanted instead of accepting what she was given. Rethis helped her prepare arguments. They practiced responses to every possible objection. But the night before she was scheduled to leave, Valara could not sleep. She stood on the observation deck looking down at Earth, wondering if she was making the right choice. She heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find Do-hyun walking toward her. He was not supposed to be on the flagship. Security should have stopped him. But somehow he had convinced Ji-won to bring him up. Or maybe Ji-won had decided he needed to be here. Do-hyun stopped a respectful distance away. He said he heard she was leaving tomorrow. He said he came to tell her something important. Valara waited, her heart beating faster than it should. Do-hyun took a breath and spoke carefully. He said she should go home. Not just for the meeting, but for good. She should go back to her people and be the leader they needed. Earth would be fine. Humans would figure out relations with the Empire. She did not need to stay. Valara felt something break inside her chest. She asked him why he would say that. Did he want her to leave? Do-hyun shook his head quickly. No, he did not want her to leave. But what he wanted did not matter. What mattered was what was right. And it was not right for her to abandon her responsibilities because of him. He was just a custodian who shared some meals with her. That was not a reason to give up a throne. Valara felt anger rise sharp and hot. She walked toward him, closing the distance he had kept. She told him he was wrong. He was not just a custodian. He was the first person who saw her as someone worth caring about, without calculating what he could gain. He was the person who taught her that leadership was not about power or status. It was about seeing who needed help and helping them. That lesson was worth more than any throne. She said she was not staying because of him. She was staying because he had shown her what kind of leader she wanted to be. She was staying because 3 months in a storage room had taught her more about her people and their needs than 20 years in a palace. She was staying because this was her choice, and it was the right choice. Do-hyun stared at her. He opened his mouth to argue. Then he closed it. He had spent 2 years thinking he knew what was best for everyone, thinking he should make choices for other people to protect them from himself. But Minji had taught him today that people deserve to make their own choices, even when those choices were hard, even when those choices might lead to pain. He told Valara he was sorry. He said he was doing the same thing he had done to his family, deciding for them what they needed instead of trusting them to know their own minds. It was not his place to tell her what to do. If she wanted to stay, if she thought it was right, then he should support her choice, not question it. Valara felt the anger drain away, replaced by something warm and grateful. She said thank you. Then she asked him what he really wanted. Not what he thought was right. Not what he thought she should do. What did he want? Do-hyun was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke honestly. He said he wanted her to stay. He wanted to keep knowing her. Not as a princess, not as an ambassador, just as the person he shared meals with and talked to about life. He said these past 3 months had been the most alive he had felt in years. He did not want that to end. Valara smiled. She said that was what she wanted too. Then she asked if he would wait for her. Just 2 weeks while she went home and fought for this choice. Would he be here when she came back? Do-hyun said yes, of course. Where else would he go? Commander Tavik watched this exchange from the shadows near the door. He had been standing guard without them noticing. He had heard everything. Part of him wanted to interrupt, to remind his princess of proper protocol. But another part of him, the part that had read Do-hyun's military record and understood what honor meant, stayed quiet. When Do-hyun left, escorted by Ji-won, who had been waiting patiently outside, Tavik approached Valara. He expected her to be embarrassed that he had witnessed such a personal conversation, but she just looked at him calmly and asked if he thought she was making a mistake. Tavik considered the question seriously. Then he said no. He did not think it was a mistake. He said he had spent 3 months believing his princess had been kidnapped or was being held against her will. But now he understood. She had been free for the first time in her life, and she wanted to hold on to that freedom. He said that Etherian culture valued duty and honor above all else, but they had forgotten what those words really meant. Duty was not just following orders. Honor was not just maintaining status. Sometimes duty meant choosing the hard path because it was right. Sometimes honor meant admitting when traditions needed to change. He told Valara that he would support her request to the Emperor. He would testify that staying on Earth as ambassador was not a rejection of her duties. It was an expansion of them. It was leadership that looked forward instead of backward. Valara felt tears in her eyes. Tavik had been with her family for 30 years. He was more than a guard. He was like an uncle. His support meant everything. The next morning, Valara boarded the fastest ship in the fleet bound for the Etherian homeworld. The journey would take 5 days. She spent that time preparing her arguments, practicing her presentation, trying to anticipate every objection. But she also spent time thinking about Do-hyun, about his daughter who was learning to trust him again, about his quiet strength, about how he made her laugh even when everything was complicated, about how he saw her not as a princess but as Hanul, someone worth caring about. She wondered if he understood what he meant to her. Probably not. He seemed determined to see himself as ordinary. But there was nothing ordinary about someone who helped without counting the cost. Nothing ordinary about someone who fed strays and fixed broken things and treated everyone with the same basic dignity. On Earth, Do-hyun tried to return to work. The transit hub was still his job, even if everything else had changed. But it was different now. People recognized him. They stared. Some asked for autographs or pictures. He hated it. Ji-won kept the worst of them away. She had appointed herself his permanent bodyguard without asking. She said someone had to keep him from getting mobbed by fans or trampled by tourists who wanted to see where the famous Custodian worked. One night during his shift, Ji-won found him in the storage room again. He was cleaning it out, packing up the blankets and heater. The room was being converted into part of the new embassy complex.